What is going on, crew? Welcome back to the Boardroom Podcast, where we help you stay calm, change lives, and have business on your terms. Now, I'm excited here because we have a special guest who's in the real estate market, specializes in helping entrepreneurs. Primarily, I think we were talking before we went live. Your primary clientele and things like that are like health and wellness practitioners, gym owners. So if you have like a health and wellness business and you're leasing and things like that. Colin made a comment kind of like in passing where like he saves his clients like $200,000 in lease or something ridiculous like that. What were you talking about when you were saying like, hey, we typically save people a bunch of money on their leasing agreement that they would not have if they didn't go through us?
Yeah, well, absolutely. First of all, man, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. So we specialize in representing the tenant and buyer side of real estate transactions. And, the average lease renewal negotiation that we do, you got a tenant that's in a property or a building and their lease comes up for expiration. The average transaction that we're involved with, we save them over $200,000 in renegotiating that lease rate down to a market rate, but then also capturing significant concessions like free rent, renovation allowances, lower annual increases. And then we get into even more complex things like resetting base years and expense stops. The summary is this: most commercial real estate transactions have a couple $100,000 of margin available. And landlords love to tell tenants things like everyone's paying this, or we can't do this, or we can't go below this number, or our lender won't allow us to give you this much in concessions. And they're basically just completely snowing the tenant and hoping the tenant doesn't know better. So, we have a very specific strategy for approaching landlords, whether it's a new space or a renewal or a purchase, and the results speak for themselves. But there's a couple $100,000 that you can either forfeit or you can capture and save. And most people forfeit that money. Most business owners, even people that are very savvy in their own lane of business, they don't understand how the commercial real estate game's played. And because of that, they get played and they lose a lot of money.
A lot of things in business, you end up paying a lot of ignorance tax.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it's one of those, and you can't know it all. Like there's just no way that you can just be somebody who understands every single aspect. And so I'm curious how you even got into this space where you're helping people save money on their commercial leases and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in property management when I was 19. It's just, I got out of high school, started working right away, didn't want to go to college. So started working. I got into brokerage when I was 22, and I worked for a gentleman that he represented large retailers. So like Walmart, Wendy's, Blockbuster, those types of tenants. I did that for a number of years. And then I got into more individualized, business ownership representation, like office users, industrial users, healthcare providers. And what eventually got us to start this company is I was working for one of the largest healthcare REITs in the country. So a REIT is a real estate investment trust. So it's basically a professional investor. People give them money like you'd give Amazon money, and then they would go, build a distribution center, or you give Apple money and they design new phones. Like you give this company money and then they go buy real estate. So I work for the largest medical healthcare REITs in the country, and we had a couple lease renewals coming up for expiration. So I'm talking to the asset manager out of Scottsdale, and he says, "Colin, have you met with Dr. So-and-so?" And I said, "Yeah, I met with him last week." And he said, "Does he have a broker?" "No." "Does he know the market?" "No." "Is he willing to move?" "No." And then he proceeded to tell me, "All right, great. Give him a proposal with these terms." And the terms that he wanted me to go back at were literally like $7 or $8 a square foot above the current asking rate. Like this tenant was paying $27 or $28 a foot, plus there was another couple dollars a foot getting pushed through that he didn't even realize because of operating expenses and stuff like that. If this guy would have just gone to like our marketing website, he would have seen we were at $24 a square foot as an asking rate. Instead, this guy says, go back to him at $31 a square foot. So I'm like, well, that's about $400,000 more than he should be paying over the next 7 years if he knew what he was doing. And the landlord's response was, get it done or I'll find someone else who will. So I got that lease done, and the guy overpaid literally by $400,000, $500,000, got no concessions. If he would have known what he was doing, even on a lease renewal, he could have captured free rent, renovation allowance. And so I had a couple of those deals that went down. And again, I've been doing real estate for almost a decade at this time. I'd done a lot of renewals, and I'd see a lot of people get hammered and not know it. But it just, a couple of these ones just finally came to the surface where I realized these guys need help. Like I did a pharmacy deal, I did an optometry deal, I did a ENT deal, I did a plastic surgery deal. And on each of these transactions, the practice owners literally lost a couple $100,000. And it wasn't like they weren't even upset. They didn't even know it happened. Like literally, like they weren't like yelling at me and yelling at the landlord, sending nasty emails. Like they had no clue it even happened. And so, it's one of those things where for me, I hit this point where I said, look, it's a fair fight. Both parties are voluntarily getting into the ring together. Both parties have the right to hire representation. The landlord was smart enough to do that in the form of me or someone else. The tenant, the doctors, the practice owners, they were not. They didn't know either they could or they didn't know it was available. And so after a number of those deals, I just realized there's a great opportunity to help people at a higher level. The landlords have enough help. They can find someone else to help them. Whereas these practice and business owners, they don't even know it's available. So we launched the company in 2009, and we are now in all 50 states, and we have over 5,500 practice or business owners that we're helping with their real estate, like as we speak right now. And our whole model is just to help them protect their time, protect their money, and help them maximize their profitability through their real estate transactions.
That is awesome. So essentially, you started out on the other side of the fence, right? Right, representing the guys who were hosing.
No, they are, man. You look at it, and people, when they hear those stories, are like, wait a second. But I always have to say, hey, before you throw something at me, just realize this. If you were going to go sell your house, which a lot of people have sold a house in the last 5 years, and if your real estate agent said, hey, listen, I know your house is probably only worth like 600,000, but I think I can sell it for $1 million because the market's wacky and people are paying, ridiculous prices. You're not going to tell your broker, you know what? Hold on a second. Like if the true intrinsic value is 600,000, like, let's not play games. I don't need $1 million. Like you sell for 600,000 and we'll just let the next guy sell for $1 million. You'd say, no, dude, give me, like, if you could get a higher tax return from the government, if you could buy a car at a discount with a coupon, like that would save you $10,000, you wouldn't be saying, well, hold on a second. The dealership's going to make $8,000 less because of this coupon or this discount. Like, I'm not comfortable. The dealership needs to make their money. You would say, give me the best deal I can get.
100%.
And that's how landlords are. Landlords are like, listen, if Chipotle was here, they'd have a broker, they'd have a representative. Like, it's this person's fault for not knowing what they're doing. And I'm not obligated to help this person not lose 200 grand. Like, that's how they look at it.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's business. It's not right or wrong. It's just is, right? And it's one of those things where you can get on your moral high ground and be upset about how the game played, or you can opt to learn the damn game and start playing because somebody else knows the rules and they're just playing with the rules that they have, right? And taking advantage of the game, right? And if you don't know it, you either are paying ignorance tax or you're getting played by the person who does know it. So for those of you who are listening, especially if you have a lease and you have several locations, which a good amount of our listeners have practices and have gyms and have multiple locations, and even we have law firms and things like that. Like, if you have a lease, commercial lease, it's worth having somebody like you go through and just go through it. Like, do you guys provide those service where you're like, hey, if you want us to kind of go through this, like, we can just do an audit of your current agreement and see how you're getting hosed? Because it seems like it's not a matter of if you're getting hosed. If you don't have presentation, you're definitely getting hosed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we start by just doing a lease evaluation or a lease analysis. And it's not much different than someone else. Like, if you went to a dentist, they'd just say, hey, listen, let me look inside your mouth. Let me take an x-ray. And with a matter of minutes, they can say, hey, look, your bite's off, or you've got recession here. I see a cavity here. I mean, we have ways of looking at their leases and the current market. And with the exception of a couple random, like super random places where maybe it's a town with like one stoplight and two buildings, like, we might have to dig a little deeper there. But for most markets, we have enough data and intelligence and resources. We can look at a lease, and with a matter of a few minutes, we can say, you've got a good lease, you've got a fair lease, you have a really bad lease, et cetera. And then the other thing with it too is, 99% of all leases have built-in escalators. They increase on an annual basis. And typically those increases outpace inflation. So, we have had record inflation the last couple years, but prior to that, almost every lease, it bumps up 3%, 4%, et cetera, per year. Well, when you get to the end of a 5, 7, or 10-year term, the rate you're paying is typically significantly higher than a new tenant would pay if you vacated that space. And so we've got to bridge that delta or that gap and get it down. Well, no landlord wants to voluntarily just lower your rent by $200,000. So it takes a strategy to get there. And then on top of that, concessions like, free rent, free build out periods, renovation allowances, like landlords will pay money to renovate a space in exchange for a longer term lease. Those are all negotiable. And so the biggest thing we deal with is people don't know that you could have representation. That's the top one for the mainstream healthcare providers. They're just so busy, they don't have time to figure it out. And they just say, well, I don't have time to deal with it. Just give me the lease. And then the other thing we deal with is we get people that are super savvy in their lane, and they think it's maybe a sign of weakness to hire someone to quote negotiate for them. And it's like, listen, man, it's not about pride or not about you not being super talented. It's about the fact that you don't have access to all the data and you don't have the time or ability to put together a posture and a strategy. Because if you don't have a posture and a strategy, you are truly you're just begging a landlord. Like if you don't have other properties with bona fide offers and you can't reference other deals that have happened recently and what you've done recently, you're literally just begging the landlord, and they know when they're being begged. Like they know when you have no clue what you're doing. And if you're doing it by yourself, they're going to assume that you are ignorant as far as how the game's played.
Yeah, I mean, even like bringing ego into something like that is like going into a surgery and not having any idea what procedure needs to be performed. It's like you can be the best surgeon in the world, but if you're entering an environment with no information whatsoever, even whoever has the information is going to win. So it's one of those things where I don't even see any place for ego in a situation like that, because it's like, if you don't know what you don't know, the person who has the information, they're going to take advantage of you, right? Whether we like it or not. And even if you think about, I've done a lot of studying of like history and different like historical movements and things like that. And one of the biggest ways to keep people ignorant and keep them obedient to the status quo is limiting and controlling the process and distribution of information. That's the number one way. So for you, you're representing the clients, and you're ultimately getting them access to have the information to be able to ultimately get the best deal possible and not get taken advantage of because they're just ignorant otherwise.
Yeah, and the way that we do that, not to get too detailed here, but you got to have other options to compare it to. And so if you just pick a property and start negotiating, the only basis you have as far as where the terms end up is based upon the very first offer. Well, that's a terrible comparison. So if you were going to buy something and you went to 4 or 5 places that sold the same product and you negotiated with 4 or 5 different sellers of that, and then you had best and final terms from 4 or 5 people, that would give you the strength and the information you need to negotiate. If you just went to one and looked at where they started versus where they ended, you might get some movement on the start versus the ending terms, but you don't know if that's a good deal compared to where you could have ended up somewhere else. And the problem with real estate is there's not a manufacturer of one product. It's not like you're buying a Ford F-150 Platinum and you can look at the spec sheet and see this upgrade costs this, and this is what Ford sells it to the dealership at. I mean, there's no MSRP. And so you're dealing with these abstract intangibles, and landlords will start their pricing here. You have no clue if that's where they're starting. If there's $8 a square foot of margin there, and they're just waiting to see how savvy or ignorant you are. Like landlords know that everyone wants a deal. Everyone wants to start somewhere and then come down, or they want to start with concessions and get nothing and then achieve something. So landlords are super savvy at leaving margin in deals to let the consumer or the individual person negotiate. And then the person will get margin, they'll get movement, and then they're going to walk away and like go home and tell their spouse, like, man, I crushed this landlord today. And like, I got him to do this, this, and this. And it's like a 4-year-old wrestling their 30-year-old dad. Like the 4-year-old didn't win. Like the 30-year-old dad let the 4-year-old pin them. And then the 4-year-old goes and tells mom, hey, I beat dad in wrestling today. And so it sounds funny to say, but a lot of these, I would be involved in these deals and these guys would ask for things and we would give them things from the landlord side. And these guys would feel like they just completely
feel like they won because they don't know what to actually ask for.
No, these guys are going to like leave their profession, become a professional real estate negotiator because they just crushed this one deal. And meanwhile, these guys are walking away thinking they won a lot of times, or it was quote fair. And the landlord saying, I just made $400,000 more than I should have if they were represented. And that's the game. So the whole idea going back to it is strategies. Is if you negotiate with one landlord, you don't have strategy. In order to have strategy, you've got to be negotiating simultaneously with 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 landlords, 3 or 4 properties. That takes time, that takes energy, it takes sophistication. And if you don't have the time or energy or know how to do it, you're not going to be in a position of strength. And so that's the basis of creating a posture is you've got to know the market, and you can't know the market off of asking lease rates or quoted terms. You've actually got to drill down and go 2 or 3 rounds with landlords to get to best and finals before you can say, hey, this is a good deal, an average deal, a bad deal, or an amazing deal. And that's part of the process of why you would hire someone to do it for you.
Yeah, and it's just doing your due diligence, right? Being willing to do so. And most people who are entrepreneurs, they're busy trying to run their business, so they don't actually have the kind of bandwidth to do the kind of due diligence that's required to ultimately get the best deal and set themselves up for success. So you said you started this in 2009, right? And now you're like nationwide. So we have a lot of entrepreneurs listening. I think it requires skill to be able to grow and scale a business in that way. So how'd you go about getting this from like your one location to nationwide? What was that process like getting the business to that scale?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I had been doing real estate for almost 10 years before we started the company. And then we worked in just Colorado, mostly on the Front Range for the first, 4.5, 5 years. And, essentially it's just a matter of, if we're talking about scaling, which we'll break from real estate, go to scaling right now. It's, you've got to figure out and master core competencies. Like you've got to figure out, what are the fundamentals of my core competencies? And so I always start with this. Anytime I'm talking to business owners and we break from real estate and we start talking about building businesses. And I guess the short answer to why we've had success is because we've helped tens of thousands of business owners save so much money and so much time that they just keep telling friends and colleagues. That's the short answer to our company's success is excellent communication, setting expectations, following through, great communication in the process. That's the stuff that clients want to deal with. But when it comes to the scaling aspect of it is, you got to figure out what your core competencies are. In our case, like in the very beginning, it was finding clients and then doing real estate deals. And then you look at what are the fundamentals of those core competencies. How do you find clients? What are the best ways to find clients? And then you get into the real estate side. What's going to allow us to have results in the real estate transaction that's superior to other firms that are out there? And so we start breaking down the fundamentals of those. Like for us, we have to negotiate on 4 or 5 properties on every deal. Otherwise, we can't tell the client unequivocally it's the best terms available to them. But if we do that, we can give them there's no other properties. We didn't miss any properties. And we couldn't have scraped any deal and scraped the bottom of the barrel any further. Like you have the best terms available. We can't force a landlord to do something, but you are now choosing which property to move forward with. And you have all the information. And if you have information, that gives you peace of mind, it gives you confidence. And so we start looking at the fundamentals of how we tour clients, how we collect market information, how we help clients, feel empowered to make decisions because they know that it's the best terms, the best properties. We do a lot of purchase versus lease analysis, helping them decide to purchase or lease, helping them structure financing, like holding their hand through the entire process. So for us, it's just been a matter of finding clients and then figuring out the best ways to do that.
How have you been able to maintain quality of like the service that you're doing as you started to expand out, right? What are like the things that you have in place to ensure that although somebody is not working directly with you, they're working with the organization, they're still going to get that quality of service and the quality of output as if they were working with you directly?
That's great. So that became another core competency, which was the training and the quality standards. How do we make sure that all of our agents and brokers have the exact same mindset? They have the same game plan. They tour the same way. They use the same documents for lease analysis. They're pulling from the same databases to get the same data so that we have the most accurate information. We have standards as far as how we communicate to clients, how we present information. And essentially, it's the fundamentals and standardizing those things at the highest level. So, if you go through the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A, like they've got a process for how they take your order, how they take payment, and then there's all these things happening on behind the scenes. It's the same thing for us as we looked at every aspect of finding clients, doing real estate deals, any hurdles that you typically come up against, the most common pitfalls. And then we try to get in front of those and say, if you see this coming, you gotta adjust before it gets there. And here's how you communicate to clients. And so standardizing and establishing the fundamentals of the training process, you train people the right way and you program them the right way. The better the programming, the better the output, the garbage in, garbage out, or the good in, the good out. That's what we focus on. And that's where the vast majority of our time is spent now is quality control with our agents. And the more we pour to them, the more they pour back into the clients.
That makes sense. And I like that mindset. Ultimately, is like, for me, I'm a very process and systems type person, right? It's like, how do we essentially set it up to where the system and the process is creating an environment that makes winning inevitable for our team and for our clients, right? And the less decision-making people have to make, the more they can focus on executing at a really, really high level, which it sounds like that's exactly what you guys have done, is you turn everything as much as you can into standard processes. You've got decision-making processes, you've got systems in place, and you've got a lot of training designed to reduce how much unnecessary thinking like your people have to do, to where it's like, hey, they can just follow the process and the end result is going to be exactly what you need it to be, which is going to be the client getting the best deal, them getting the best results, and the transaction successfully being completed. All right. Now, for the lease side, leasing is not all you guys do. I mean, that's one of your core competency, but what are the other types of real estate deals that you guys?
Yeah, we help them purchase land and then figure out how to develop properties, hiring the right people. We help them purchase existing buildings or office condos. So typically, I mean, when you're looking at commercial real estate, about 90% of the transactions that happen or more are leases, and that's just based upon product availability. And so when you're looking at residential, some people might have someone help them like find an apartment or find a house to lease or rent, but typically the agents are working on the purchase side of residential transactions. Well, in commercial real estate, buildings cost more to build. The codes are higher. The building codes are more stringent. Businesses want more flexibility as far as location, size, build out. And so 90% of the transactions that happen or more are leases. So that's why we spend so much time there. But we do a significant amount of purchases. And I'm a huge proponent of buying commercial real estate for businesses. If the numbers work, if the location works, et cetera. And we have a very specific way that we evaluate whether you should lease or purchase. And we help facilitate that entire process so that, most people have never bought a commercial property. There are a lot of differences. And so we hold your hand through the entire process to make sure that you get the right property, the best terms, the best lender that's matched up with your deal, because it's not like residential lending, a lot of differences. And we just make sure that they're taken care of at the highest level.
I like that. So essentially, if there's a purchase opportunity, you do make it clear for the client. Now, what are your thoughts on, like, do you recommend any of your clients when they're looking to purchase? Do you help them turn some of those things into and help them build like an investment portfolio in the commercial side? Like, where do you guys where's your lane when it comes to that? Right? Is it just going to be focusing on this, or do you recommend them out, or is your team big enough to where you have experts who can actually not only negotiate the best lease, help them with purchase, but actually help them build a portfolio of commercial real estate?
Yeah. So I would say all of what you just mentioned are parts or aspects of what we do. The best way I can explain it is if someone comes to us and says, I want to either relocate or open my first office or practice or this business, or I want to scale and add additional locations, we're going to go to market and show them all their options to lease and to purchase. Because a lot of times people have a preconceived idea of what they want to do, but it's not based upon the actual market. It's, they heard someone say, well, you should never own your real estate because it cuts into your capital for scaling, or someone will say you have to own your real estate. There's not a one size fits all. So if you said, listen, I want to open a 3,000 square foot, whatever the business or practice is in this submarket, we're going to scrape every property and figure out how many legitimate options you have to lease and to own. There's some markets where you said, I want to be in this exact intersection. There's nothing available for sale. So you might be committed to owning, but it might not be an option because every property costs $10, $15 million. It's multi-tenant, multi-story, or it's not for sale. Chick-fil-A owns it or Walmart owns it. You might not have an option there. But a lot of times there is a property or two that's available for sale. So then we get into the analytics of which one makes more sense. So the first question is going to be, which location is your business going to be more successful at? We love owning real estate, but I don't want to put you in an inferior location, quality of property, worse co-tenancy, bad parking, just so you can say you own it. So we've got to say, look, are these comparable in terms of the success potential for the business or the practice? If the answers are yes, then we go to the next level. What are the costs of the two? And if we lease here after the landlord pays for a portion of the build out with free rent, all the concessions, what's the cost of leasing over here for 10 years? And then we come over here to the ownership side. After you purchase it, after you pay for all the build out, fully renovated, whatever it might look like, what's the effective cost of owning? And then how does that compare? Because when you own, you pay down principal. So your net worth goes up every month. It's like a mortgage on your house. You pick up additional tax deductions because you can depreciate a portion of the real estate. You can bonus depreciate it. You can take out some significant tax savings on the ownership side. A lot of times, you can take out tax deductions that could be to the tune of tens of thousands or 100,000 or more per year just by owning real estate and doing nothing different, just because of the way you structure, cost seg studies or bonus depreciation. And so we want to look at what is the true cost of owning versus leasing. It's not just the payment per month. We got to factor in tax deductions, principal pay down, upside of appreciation, which is hypothetical, but it typically does happen. Most properties do appreciate in value historically over a period of time. So we look at those numbers and then it gets into feasibility. Like if you could lease and the effective cost of owning is $5,000 and on the ownership side, it's $5,000, that's a no brainer. Like you would choose ownership. A lot of times though, you're looking at an option to lease at $5,000 effective cost after tax deductions, and the purchase side might be $15,000. Now we have to say, look, is it worth it because of all the benefits over here? And then that gets into one more level. So typically it's going to cost you a little bit more to own or a lot more to own, but you're building wealth. Like it's no different than it costs money to invest in a 401k or in a house or in savings or in other assets. But the idea is it's worth the investment, not just the expense, but the investment. Because if I do this on a consistent basis over the next 10, 15, 20 years, most people that buy commercial real estate in 20 years have an asset that's worth $1 million, $2 million free and clear, because most commercial loans are 15, 20 years. And so are you willing to push a little further now, save a little more now, so that in 15, 20 years, you got an extra, $1, $2, $3 million sitting in an asset free and clear that you could sell tax deferred or not. There's a lot of things you can do with it at that time.
Which makes sense. And you guys are going through and you're working through all those numbers with your clients. And it sounds like a very hands-on process, right? So how does it make it worth, like, what's in it for you guys to put that much time and effort into helping your clients get the best deal, right? It sounds like a lot of work. I'm going to be, I get why they're willing to settle to just get the deal done, because it sounds like you guys are doing a ton of work. Right.
Well, that's why it's funny, because there's some industries where they don't want to tell people what they really do. They want to keep it mysterious, thinking like the more mysterious, the more likely somebody is to get hired or we tell you what we actually do, because the more we tell you, the more the person should say, there's no way I can do this at the same level. I have to hire someone. So it's kind of funny. You ever talk to somebody where you're not sure what they do or how they do it? Like, we tell people, this is what we're going to do for you. Here's the expectations. Here's the result. But the answer to your question is, real estate is set up extremely favorably for buyers and tenants. If you're a buyer on the residential side, you should be aware that commissions are typically paid by the seller of the property. Most sellers take a portion of the proceeds, they set it aside to pay their listing agent, and then also to attract or entice a buyer and a buyer's agent to bring them activity. So, the vast majority of residential deals, the seller's paying both commissions. Commercial real estate is set up even more so this way. Landlords and sellers want tenants, they want to sell properties. And so they set aside a commission that's built for two people, their agent or their side, and then the buyer or tenant side. So we get paid by the landlord or the seller as a predetermined amount of money based upon the value of the deal. And so the tenants that are hiring us, the practice owners, the business owners, they can get our expertise, save a significant amount of time, the money, all the avoidance of pitfalls, et cetera. And then we don't get paid if we don't perform. And so it truly doesn't cost them any money out of pocket. And sometimes people say, well, yeah, but it's built into the deal. It is built into the deal, but it's either going to stay in the landlord's pocket or the listing broker gets a double commission. So sometimes people will say, well, I'm not going to hire someone because I want to save that money. You're not the initiator of the payment. Like, you're not the one paying. And if you pay one person less, you save money. That landlord's either going to pocket that money and just pad their margin. But most deals are structured that the listing broker just gets both sides or a double commission. So there's not a financial savings to go it alone. There's no time savings to go it alone. It's literally just, you don't know that people are available to help you, or you think that you can do it better. And here's, I'll tell you, anybody can get a deal done. Like, anybody can, a 3-year-old could take a pencil and sign a lease. Truthfully, it doesn't mean that it's done properly.
Yeah. And that makes sense. So for those who are listening, a lot of people who are listening here, they're listening to this podcast, or they're in my world, they're all about leverage, right? And they're all about, how do you get the most for the inputs that you put in? And a lot of time that's going to come through delegation and working with people who specialize in different verticals, right? And staying in your lane. I'm a big fan of learning enough to just know that I'm not going to get, like, I want to know enough to know that the person that I'm working with is legitimate, right? I don't want to know enough to be like, I can go in and do it myself. Because that's a lot of time you have to invest in that. I just want to know enough to know that I'm not getting taken advantage of, right? So what kind of questions should somebody ask a listing broker or somebody in your organization to know that they're going to be getting the best? What are good questions for them to ask and be mindful of?
Yeah, I would tell you this. The best game plan I can give anyone is hire a tenant or buyer agent that is not going to have conflicts of interest. And so this is the number one thing that happens in real estate. It's the number one issue where real estate agents get sued and get in trouble all the time, is they're working for the landlord or the seller, and the buyer tenant doesn't know that. They think they're working for them. So you got to hire someone that's going to be only on your side of the transaction, not either overtly or secretly working for the landlord. They don't have you can't hire the person whose name is on the sign in front of the building for the landlord, because that person has a fiduciary to the landlord. So you got to hire someone who has no conflicts of interest, that's going to work just for you in the transaction. And then that person is going to gather all the market information. They're going to start educating you in the process. You're not going to have to ask a whole lot of questions if you hire the right person. Now, if you were talking to some agents trying to figure out who to hire, the questions you want to ask that broker or that agent would be, do you have conflicts of interest? Do you specialize in my industry or my segment of the market? Do you know more about my use or my requirement than most other brokers do? What's your strategy? How do you negotiate? Why are you going to get me a better deal? Why should I trust you? What is your company based upon? What are your company's, what's your company's core competencies and values? And if you ask those questions, you're going to know quickly, I like the person, I trust them, or, hey, thank you for your time, but I'm going to go on to the next person and keep going till I find the right person for me. There's truly, at the end of the day, even on a shorter term commercial lease, let's say a 4 or 5 year deal, couple of thousand feet, there's a minimum $100,000 on the table. And that's talking like cheap rents and kind of a no thrills property. You get into nicer, like Class A retail or office or medical, there's just too much on the line. You don't want to be the guy that loses $400,000, signs a 10-year lease, and then realizes there's nothing you can do to undo that. There's no mulligans, there's no do-overs, you're locked. So the key is hiring a broker or an agent that you trust that's got a good game plan, And that person will then tell you, here's what you need to know. And you're going to know quickly this person knows their stuff and they're going to take care of me.
Awesome. And what we'll do is for those guys who are listening, we will actually take some of those questions that Colin shared and put it in the show notes so you can actually go through and you use it as if you have a location and you want to get your lease looked at. I strongly encourage you to consider reaching out and just having a conversation and using those questions to your advantage. Like, hey, let's put these guys to the test and be like, hey, let me see if they know what they're doing and if they're going to be a good fit for me. But I think you have absolutely nothing to lose, especially if they're performance based. Those are like my favorite type of engagements because all of our greed are in alignment. Right? You're incentivized to win, but as you're trying to win, I win as a result because the incentives are aligned. Right?
No, that's really good. I mean, honestly, that's the best place to be. I mean, you talked about, building very successful fitness centers. It doesn't matter what it is. If you can't provide a result that's commensurate with the expectation that you set from the beginning, you're not going to succeed. You're not going to get referrals. You're not going to grow your brand, and you're not going to have the results financially. The other side's true, though. If you set expectations, then you meet and exceed them. If you provide a value that truly does, create an upside financially, time-wise, et cetera, then it's going to be the natural result. You're going to build your business. You get people results and you deliver and you perform and it works. If your sports team wins, they sell more tickets. If they lose, they sell less tickets. There's a really beautiful, that's why I love capitalism. It either works or it doesn't work. And then the system spits you out. So, for us, we're not perfect. We're not the only company in the country that does this, but we think we have a really good system and we put our money where our mouth is on every deal. And we tell clients, look, if at any time of the transaction you're not 100% satisfied, then you need to move on to find a broker that'll take care of you. And the reality is that it's very rare that happens, but I truly believe in it. We've got to perform on every deal. And if we do, we'll be taken care of. And if we don't, then we'll have to learn from that mistake.
But it was really, really good conversation. I think what you do is very fascinating. What would be the best way for someone to get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with us would be our website. And it's carr.us. So CARR.us, upper right-hand corner or the nav bar. If you're on mobile, you can click to find an agent. And we're licensed in all 50 states. You can get a hold of people that are in your market or area, start a conversation. You can read up on bios of our different agents if you want to select from a number of people. Or you can just send us an email saying, hey, so have someone contact me. I'm in this area, and you'll be hearing from someone very, very quickly. Awesome.
What's the best advice you've received in the last 12 months? What's something that's really stuck out to you as you think about it?
I would end with a John C. Maxwell quote. And I'm assuming most people have heard this, but I love the quote. It says, if you want to change your life, you've got to change something you do on a daily basis. The secret of your success lies in your daily habits. And I know people would say, well, that sounds cliche, but here's the reality. You can't endeavor in a certain direction or an area and do something on a daily basis for professional development or health and fitness or spiritual growth or whatever direction you're going. You cannot do something on a daily basis with excellence and not see transformation. So I love that. For me personally, I'm going after stuff personally, professionally, spiritually every day. And that's what I'm hoping to do, is become the best I can be.
Awesome. I love that. I think daily habits compound. I'm a big proponent of that. And it's one of those things where if you learn how to master that in your personal life, it just translates beautifully into business. And so thank you for sharing that, man. Colin, it was good having you on. For those guys who are listening, everything that you heard is going to be in the show notes. Go to carr.us, CARR.us. If you have like a location, you're looking into commercial real estate, if you're going to be signing a lease, or if you're already in a lease and you just want to know how much you got hosed, if you're willing to take a peek below the hood just to find out, I think it's worth engaging and just arming yourself with better information so that your next deal, you're able to get the best, right? So, man, thank you for jumping on. For those who are listening, go ahead and check them out in the show notes. Till next time, guys, stay calm, change lives, and have business on your terms.